Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has had a rough old time recently. First, there was the U-turn of the original £28 billion Green Prosperity Plan, and then this week came 1, 2 and now 3 cases of anti-Semitism by Labour candidates being reported. And you can almost feel that is a story with the potential to run absolutely out of control. But does any of it make any difference at all outside the Westminster bubble? There was an opinion poll by Savanta published today showing the Labour lead over the Tories falling quite sharply by 7 points. Now, that's just one poll, might be an outlier, and there are technical reasons to be a bit sceptical, but equally it could be the beginning of an ominous trend for Labour. I'm joined now by Tom Baldwin, former head of communications for the party and author now of a new biography of Keir Starmer to be published later this month. Tom, very good to see you there.
See you.
I don't suppose that Keir Starmer has had a rougher week since he became Labour leader than he's going through right at the moment. How is he going to handle it?
Well, I think he's going to have to get used to, is this the roughest week yet? Because there probably have actually been rougher weeks for Keir Starmer, including when he lost the Hartlepool election to the Tories,
yes,
which was a very safe Labour seat. So, I mean, this is not the roughest week. No. This is a bump in the road, and there are always bumps in the road. And I do detect a palpable desire on the part of a desperate Conservative Party and parts of the media, not necessarily yourself, but parts of the media, to shift the narrative. People are bored of writing about how Labour are going to form the next government and how Labour's got a 20-point lead. There are other polls out tonight showing Labour's lead is extending, by the way. Well, so you're just, all I'm saying is be careful. One swallow doesn't make a summer. Have mistakes been made? Yes, they have. Do lessons need to be learned? Yes. Will he learn them? I think he probably will.
What mistakes have been made?
I think there was a mistake about the much lauded scrutiny of candidates. I think a mistake was made about how fast they moved the writ for this by-election. I think a mistake was made about the initial decision to stand by Azhar Ali.
Yeah.
But if you stand back from that, he's also done something which I don't remember any major party leader doing, which is to sack the candidate in a by-election when he's expected to win. I've never seen anyone do that. And so I think there's a bit of wood and trees going on.
This is new, though. Of course, it might end up either with a candidate being elected into Parliament who doesn't have the Labour whip, who nobody really wants to be there and who has been disowned by the party, or indeed somebody like George Galloway, who is a lifelong loather of Keir Starmer. So it's not easy this time.
No, and I mean, I know there were Labour Jewish MPs who were saying privately over the weekend, stand by Azhar Ali because we don't want to provide a window for George Galloway to get in. So these decisions are complicated, and sometimes you do have to take a bit of time over them. I kind of, look, I'm totally prepared to accept decisions. Some of the decisions have been flawed and mistakes been made, and I think Keir Starmer himself is pretty furious about it all.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'd rather have a leader who kind of takes his time over a decision and makes the right one than someone who makes a decision instantly. And the last Labour government was littered with decisions made within one news cycle which turned out to be flawed.
Now, because you know the Labour Party very well, for how long the party has been bedevilled by different factions fighting each other. Keir Starmer doesn't really come from that tradition. He came late into politics. But right at the moment, there are people, as it were, from the right of the party with a big, clammy arm around his shoulders thinking that they have somehow got him. There are people on the left of the party wanting to fight back. And you can see factionalism creeping back into this situation. So how does he handle that?
I think he handles it in the way he's always handled it, in that he doesn't come from a particular faction. He was 52 years old when he entered Parliament. He didn't grow up in that Blair-Brown era. I don't think he'd necessarily know which members of his shadow cabinet are Blairites or Brownites. He's just not very interested in that. Yeah. His focus is on winning and then bringing real change. And I don't think you necessarily need to be part of a faction to do that. There's an open question. Maybe he'll need his own faction when times get tough. Maybe he'll need people to gather around him, or wagons to circle around him when times are tough. But so far, he's been able to move faster, I think, in changing the Labour Party and getting Labour to the cusp of victory, and he hasn't won it yet, clearly, getting Labour to the cusp of victory by not being tied to a particular ideology or any particular baggage.
Let's just turn to the 28 billion figure. These polls that we've been talking about, you're quite right. There is another poll in the Mirror tomorrow showing a huge Labour lead, a massive, massive landslide election. Though that was taken, the field work for that was before most of these problems took place, and they will filter in. The 28 billion pounds, though, has been difficult all the way through. I simply don't understand how you have a policy where you start with the amount of money it's going to cost and work backwards as to what it's actually going to be. That was surely a weird thing to do.
Yeah, £28 billion wasn't a policy. It wasn't a mission.
It was a number. Yeah.
And you don't define what you want to do by a number. All people knew was that Labour wanted to spend a lot of money. It seems to be bad politics. And what they've done is they've removed the pound sign with a purpose of actually being able to have the argument about what they want to do. Now, the slight danger is they've replaced it with another pound sign, a much smaller one. Yeah. And I think that should be regarded as the baseline for what they would spend rather than the ceiling. But I think that, again, hasn't been fully explained yet.
Well, we don't know what's going to happen, but as I was saying right at the start of the show, once you have questions over 3 candidates about what they've said, Tory researchers are going to be looking at every single Labour Party candidate everywhere in the country for anything they have said about Gaza. And given how angry people are up and down the country, there will be some things which are pretty fruity. And therefore, this is possibly a story that the Conservatives are certainly going to try to make run and run and run. And my question is, how does Keir Starmer stop that happening, or is it impossible to stop that happening?
I think he's opened investigations into other candidates. He's not thrown them out of the party, and there is an investigatory process. And it may be that when this particular spasm ends, people will clear their heads and see some sense. Look, and what's good for the goose is good for the gander too. There are Conservative candidates up and down this country who have said extraordinary things about Israel, about Palestine, about the Islamic religion, about black people. And I do urge people in the media and elsewhere just to sort of have a little sense check about whether they're applying the same scrutiny to Conservative candidates as they are to Labour candidates.
Big if the polls do narrow as a result of all these events, and Starmer has a really tough time in the weeks ahead, do you think he has the inner toughness to handle this? People are going to be going for him in a way that hasn't really happened before. As the polls narrow, everyone on the media is going to pile in there. You know that. It's the way these things work. How will he, as a person, respond, do you think?
The Keir Starmer I've got to know over the last few years is an extraordinarily tough person, and I don't think he'd been able to change the Labour Party at the speed he has without being that. I mean, when he took over as Labour leader in March 2020, Labour's 20 points behind the Conservatives, and no one gave him a chance. Even the idea of being level pegging at this stage would have been regarded as extraordinary. The fact that now it looks like his election to lose is a sign that he's been tough enough to make a hell of a lot of tough decisions.